What is the nicest thing you've ever done that no one knows about? This isn't a one-time thing. Every time I go fishing, few times a week, I bring a trash bag, and when I'm done fishing, I walk around the lake until I fill up the trash bag. I know it isn't much, but it makes me feel good and it makes the lake look better. I do this at every lake I go to. When I am on the boat, I just troll around the edge of the lake and pick up trash. It isn't a single moment, but I like doing it. Wish I didn't have to, but people like to drink and fish and throw crap on the ground. I do this when I go hiking, which is almost every weekend. I just tie a bag to my pack and clean as I go along. One Christmas a few years back, I was doing well financially and got an unexpected and quite large Christmas bonus. I read in the local newspaper about an organization that was trying to provide Christmas joy for local families who were in dire financial need. All requests for assistance were verified for authenticity. I anonymously Christmas adopted a family of 5. The dad was out of work and could only find sporadic temporary jobs in construction. The mom had severe health problems and no insurance. They were living in one of those motels that offer weekly rates. I went over the top and tried to make it their best Christmas ever. Winter coats, hats, boots, etc. for everyone in the family. A microwave oven, dishes and glasses. 3 or 4 outfits for each person. Tons of toys for the kids. An artificial Christmas tree and decorations. A gift certificate to the local grocery store. I don't think I've ever had a happier Christmas morning than the one I spent that year picturing what I hoped were the smiles on that family's faces. As a person who has had to be adopted for Christmas, thank you. I was little, and I don't remember it, but my mother told me about it and how it really saved the holiday. They were so incredibly grateful. Mine is stupid, but here it is. My friend's family is in a more or less constant struggle with money. Her mother has MS, and they're always struggling to keep up with rent, medical bills, etc. They don't have a lot, but they're grateful for what they do have, and I've helped them out with their bills when I can, but they know about it, so it doesn't count. Anyway, I work for a convention that this friend of mine and her mother, and a few of their other friends attend. They love coming and they come every year, but they would never have the money to buy memberships to it. So, I told her years ago that I get a certain number of free memberships for working there, and I just float her some of mine. It's a lie. I don't get any free memberships, but I gladly pay upwards of $200 every year so that she and her mother and her friends can enjoy an event they would otherwise not have the money to attend. She's got so much pride, though, so I don't plan on ever telling her. It's not stupid, it's about the sweetest thing I've read. I sent an anonymous donation to a friend who lost his second parent, mother, at 18 years old. He had no money, his mother left him with no money, and I actually had some extra cash lying around. I dropped off some cash in an envelope close to $1,000 for him to help with funeral expenses and or to use towards taking care of his little brother. I spent half a year and about $400+ helping my best friend get over his drug addiction. He refused to go to rehab no matter how much I pushed it to him. I bought books on addiction and how to help him through the withdrawal. It hurt watching his body basically reject him, but he and I both knew it had to be done. We don't talk about it too much anymore. He has been drug, alcohol, and smoke free for about 2.5 years now. You may have saved his life. Good work. Last year, my boyfriend of 3 years and I went through a pretty messy breakup. We hadn't talked in about 5 months when I heard an ad on the radio stating that the Tragically Hip, a band, was coming to a nearby town the next month. I remembered that during our relationship, my ex had mentioned that it was a dream of his to see them live because they were his late father's favorite band. Every time he listened to certain songs by them he cried, and he felt a very strong emotional attachment to this band. So I immediately knew I had to get him to that concert. We hadn't spoken in a long time, so I bought 2 tickets, $120 each, which isn't exactly pocket change for a teenager with a part-time job, and put them in an envelope. Coincidentally, he worked at the same place as a few of my best friends, so they told me the next time he worked and I left the unmarked envelope with the tickets inside in his mailbox. Our mutual friends talked about it for months, about how shocked and touched he was, and how he cried when he got the tickets and asked every single person he knew if they had any idea who had given them to him. I never told a single person, and to this day, 1 year-ish later, no one knows who gave them to him. That's very big of you. You're an awesome person. Kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible. This happened 2 years ago when I was a caseworker in Massachusetts. I was driving home one night in the rain and I saw an old woman on the side of the road who had a flat tire. She clearly needed help. I pulled up and asked her if I could help and she said yes. As I was changing the tire, she was getting all flustered, saying this was her husband's car and he doesn't take care of things blah blah blah. She got so flustered she actually had a heart attack and went into cardiac arrest. I am currently a NYMT, but back then I just had CPR certification. I called 911 as I was performing CPR. I went with her in the ambulance and they shocked her with the ED before we left the scene and got her pulse back. She ended up being okay. I met her husband that night at the hospital and they invited me over for dinner. I don't really tell people that story, but it was important to me. I wanted to hook some friends, a nice couple with 2 kids, up with some food and other stuff, but they were way too proud to accept loans, charity, or a handout. So I went through a good deal of effort to create a contest that I had won for a shopping spree. I had a flyer, a mailer, rules, etc. I explained that I had walked out with way more food than a single guy could eat, and was hoping they'd be willing to buy some of it off of me, really cheap. I just wanted a little something for my effort. I sold them $200 worth of groceries they desperately needed for $20. Was out on the west coast on business, out to dinner with several friends co-workers at a pretty nice oceanside restaurant. During the course of our dinner I overheard an aged couple at the next table talking and discovered that it was their anniversary. I tracked the waiter to another part of the restaurant and made arrangements to pay their bill, no matter what they ordered. I loved watching their faces when they asked for the bill and the waiter told them another restaurant patron had paid it in full to help them celebrate. If more people were like you, crap would be a lot cooler. I bought a good friend of mine a $300 necklace with her birthstone, emerald, in it. I told her it was just because. When people asked me how much it was I said oh it was just $50. But in reality that $300 really put a dent in my budget and I had to skip a few classes to save money on transit between school and home. So why did I do it? Because if it wasn't for her, I would have killed myself. She still has no idea that the day she and I spoke, the day she comforted me, my plan was to walk out of the front door of my school and throw myself into traffic. I'm here because she chatted with me for 20 minutes. I'm glad you didn't do it. This one is about my dad. When I was about 12, we were driving through Nevada and stopped someplace to get gas food. It was a really hot day and there was very few cars going through the area. Next to the gas station, there was a guy lying down on the sidewalk, completely face down, and for a moment I was afraid the guy was dead. My dad sees this and sees that I'm afraid, so he goes over to the guy and asks what's wrong. Guy isn't dead, just homeless, broke, and on his way by foot to the nearest big city about 10 miles away, because someone said they could get him a job there. My dad nods, and then goes into the gas station and comes out with a large bag of food and water, and gives it to the guy. The guy almost cries thanking my dad for the food and water, and says this will help me walk to the city. Thank you so much. And my dad goes walk it's only 10 miles away, get into the car, and I'll drive you there. So we drive 10 miles, and during this time we hear about the guy's life story, how he lost all his money paying for someone's family member, hospital bills, then lost his job, then his home, and was just desperate to try and pick up his life. He's going for an interview as a janitor at some place, and thinks he can make a decent living off the job. We get to the place, and while the guy gets out of the car, my dad says oh, wait a minute, I have some extra ties in the trunk. I'll give you some for your interview, and here's my business card. If you don't get a job, give me a call. Got an email 2 weeks later saying the guy got the job. When I was 14 my friend and I went out in the middle of the night during a snowstorm and shoveled 12 random driveways for almost 3 hours before going to bed. Constructive vandalism frick yay. Our first world Nicest. I want to get some friends together and do random yard work under cover of darkness. But all my friends are lazy. A few times I've been to the cemetery and cleaned and maintain a few random disheveled looking graves. It makes me sad that there are people that are now almost completely forgotten. Whenever I bring flowers to my niece's grave, I always put one flower on a grave nearby of a young girl who never gets any visitors. I try to do little things here and there. A few years ago, my husband and I were basically living in poverty. We were humbled into getting food stamps. $21 a month for 2 people, and we were so hungry most nights. I had a job but it only paid enough to cover rent and I was desperately looking for something better, and so was my husband. It was a bad time for us. Well, one night we were in the grocery store buying bread, peanut butter and jelly. The front of the grocery store had a kiosk where you could buy scratch tickets and scratch them off. I had a habit of double checking the ones people threw out but never buying any of my own. One was left on the countertop and I happened to notice that the bottom section was scratched off, not revealing a B, P or D, all codes for losers. It was a winner for $100. I got all excited and started to walk back towards our register when I noticed a family in the checkout next to us. One woman and 2 small kids. She looked very tired and worn out and so did the kids. We lived in a really poor neighborhood so I assumed she was poor as well. She had only a few groceries in her cart. When the cashier asked for payment, she got out some crumbled up dollar bills and a whole bunch of change. I felt so horrible. One of her daughters had walked up to me at that point and asked, out of curiosity, what I had in my hand. I handed it to her and said, "Give this to your mommy." She said okay, took it from me and went back to her mother. Mommy, look what I found." The lady seemed tired and aggravated but decided to look. She had the cashier scan it over at customer service and she had won $100. She was so happy. She turned her cart back around to get more groceries. The lady never saw her daughter talking to me. When my husband saw what I did, he said, "Well, I guess they needed it more than we did. Maybe next time." $100 isn't much, but it's something, you know? Now the best I can do is leave high value coupons next to products I won't use in the grocery store. TLDR. My husband and I were living in poverty. I found a $100 scratch lottery winner and decided to give it to a family that needed it more than us. I have been that woman. I have been so broke that I have told my daughter that I wasn't hungry so she would have enough to eat. You are selfless and I admire you. I am sure that one act of kindness will forever be remembered. There was a kid who moved to our town senior year of high school. He had moved 30 times prior partially because his mom had some issues and would get caught up with very abusive men. I figured moving that much and coming to a tight-knit school for just the last year would be awful for a kid. One day I was driving my crazy old car off campus to get lunch with my friends and saw him just sitting on the library steps staring. I pulled up and told him to hop in and join me. He did, and my friends were so great to him and welcomed him immediately. He had no car, no phone, and very little money. Every day I'd secretly buy his lunch or bring him one too so he could arrive to the table with food and not be embarrassed or hungry. I encouraged him to get a job and would drive him when his mom couldn't. He became one of my best friends, and we even went to prom together. At the end of the year, he wrote me a letter telling me how much I had helped him during the past year and how if he hadn't found me, he would have nothing in his life he now had. No regrets, that kid deserved everything. Good on you, really. When I was little, my grandfather had a stroke shortly after seeing us and my mom. He had just given my mom some money so that we wouldn't be homeless or struggling as much. He was put into a nursing home because nobody knew how to give him proper care at home. Me, my sister and mom would always go and visit him when we could. I noticed that a lot of the people around him were also stroke patients, didn't remember much of anything. And then right by this area was another full of people with memory loss. After a few months, I realized we were the only ones on the sign-in sheets that were remotely in that area. I started to pretend to be family of the other people around my grandfather since nobody could tell the difference. I befriended an old woman down the hall. Every time my gramps was getting bathed, I would go and hang out down with her and read books, talk about school, tell her jokes and such. She was one of the nicest women I ever met. One day she thanks me for coming because all the rest of her family but me hasn't shown up in years. Shortly after, I couldn't find her anywhere. I wanted to read her my favorite new book, which at the times was one of the Goosebumps, which she seemed to really enjoy me bringing. She told me about her love of action and horror movies and books before she was brought to the home. I searched the halls for her name to be on a door. Once one of the people saw me looking around everywhere all sad. They asked who I was looking for. When I told them, they informed me she had passed on. I still think about her to this day. She was one of the most genuine people I've spent my time with. I miss spending time with her, telling her little stories or talking about books or movies. RIP sweetheart. I'm happy you no longer have to struggle or hurt. Just remember, this little girl still misses you. Edit. My grandfather was also amazing. We ended up not visiting him much near the end because his stroke made him unable to realize who we were. He knew us, but he had us in the wrong order. He thought I was my mom. He thought my mom was his wife. After him crying when we left because he thought his wife, my mother, was leaving him, my mom stopped being able to handle the emotional pain part. Sadly, when this started happening, we ended up losing my grandmother to heart attack strokes in 1997. He thought my mom was his wife until he passed on in August of 2000. I took a bum out to dinner. It was after I got my life together and off the streets, and I just happened to be leaving the bank when I saw the food truck from the church leaving, and this black guy was all bitching about missing the truck. So I went up to him and said, "Hey man, I haven't eaten yet and I just going to get a sub, you wanna come with me?" And he looked at me all confused like it was a joke, but I said I was serious. So then he complied and we went to Jimmy John's and I bought him the largest sandwich they had and 2 drinks. He saved the other half of his meal and the 2 drinks. I saw him 3 days later outside of the library and he was with his friends, and he came up to me and thanked me for what I did and told his friends that I'm the coolest white guy he ever met. He said that food fed him for a few days and that the day I took him out he didn't eat for the entire day. As a dude who volunteers at a soup kitchen sometimes, thank you. It was snowing really hard one night, and my mom forced me to shovel the driveway. I was a bit pissed off about it, but went out and did it anyways. While shoveling, I noticed my front neighbor getting out of his apartment to shovel the snow too. The guy was old, maybe 55, had to always take care of his handicapped wife. He was probably shoveling the front pavement so they can go to their doctor's appointment as usual. He starts doing it, and was overwhelmed with the amount of snow and the cold. He was maybe 2/10 done and had to take a break, so he went back inside. I don't know what came over me, because I wasn't even done with my 4 times bigger driveway, but I sprinted to the other side, shoveled his driveway like my life depended on it. 5-10 minutes pass, I run back to my driveway exhausted, and the guy comes back fully equipped with more clothes than before and just stared at the shoveled driveway. He was confused. He had a look like if he wasn't sure if he did it or not, like his mind was playing tricks on him. I pretended like nothing happened, and the guy just smiled and told his wife they won't be late and pushed her out into his car. I keep complaining like a brat when my mom tells me to do a chore, but when someone doesn't want to complain, he's willing to do it, but his body can't. It just makes all the world's perspective fall into place, doesn't it? See my neighbors and not do the same. I was out on a date in a sushi restaurant about a year ago. There was a waitress, young and pretty, who was getting ridden very hard by a couple at the table next to us. I don't remember much about the couple. I think they were older, middle class, and white. My impression was that the wife didn't like the waitress because she was pretty and the wife may have caught the husband looking or something. That was just kind of the vibe I was getting. So they were just rude, complaining about the service, hustling the waitress back and forth. It was late and they were demanding almost all of the waitress's time, to the point that she wasn't really able to attend to as much, so our drinks weren't getting filled, etc. As our meal was drawing to a close and the waitress came by to drop off our bill, the mean couple stood up to leave and left their signed ticket on the table. My wife could see over to their table, and when the waitress came back and picked up the tab, she leaned over to me and said, "They didn't tip her. She's crying." The waitress shuffled back by us with tears in her eyes and went back behind the curtain. I could see a couple of the other servers comforting her, and I could tell she had had a hard night, whether because of this mean couple or whatever else might be going on in her life. So I looked at my wife and said, "Frick that." I doubled the price of our meal in the tip line, and wrote her the following note. "Thank you for being good at your job. We had a wonderful time." My wife and I signed our first names and I left the ticket on the table as we walked out. We did not look back. I work as a server, too. When people do this type of stuff, believe me, it is greatly appreciated. We have really crappy days a lot of the times, and some customers treat us like dogs. Still we have to smile and serve them. People like you are what makes it worth it. Believe me, where I work, servers average 3 months or so tops before quitting. I was working as a cashier for a second-hand store when a manager came up with one of our coupons. Somebody had dropped it on the sales floor. It was for either $10 off a $30 plus purchase or $30 off a $50 plus purchase. I was told to give it to whoever came by my till next that qualified, but I saved it so I could pick who to give it to. About an hour later a family came through, buying a cartload of clothes for their 3 young children. Their bill came to about $100, and while they didn't complain, the parents looked stressed while they watched the numbers add up. Their smiles and excitement when I told them I could give them $30 off their sale let me know I had been right to hold on to that coupon for just a few minutes longer. Just a small thing, but it certainly seemed to make their day. I once happened upon a blog of a friend of mine, where they had written about all of the trials she had when she was younger. I had known her my whole life but had had no idea about all this stuff she'd gone through, and I felt so terrible that I hadn't been able to help her. So through some quick investigating, I found a present she'd always wanted and anonymously sent it to her house with a message that basically said how proud I am of her and how much I respect her. She blogged how touched she was by the gift, and asked for the sender to come forward, but I never told her it was me. It kind of sounds creepy when I write it down, but I was happy I could make her day, even for a little while. I hope when she looks at my gift she remembers that people love her. In college, ditched hooking up with a girl who was a sure thing. Fought 2 bros at the same time and made myself look like a date rapist all to get one of the sweetest girls I've ever met out of a bad situation where her friends had left her blacked out at a party where she was 100% going to get taken advantage of. I knew her to be a virgin, so I intercepted a dude taking her back to his room and told him that she was coming home with me. They saw this as dong blocking and everyone thought I was taking her back to my place for my pleasure, so I ended up getting jumped as I took her outside. That was the fun part. Lifting weights doesn't make you tough. They learned that the hard way. 2 haymakers later I was taking her back to her dorm to put her to bed. She has no recollection of any of this and we didn't know anyone at the party, so it's remained in my head till now. Strong work. One year when I was younger, around 10, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. When Christmas time came, my family barely had any money to pay for presents because of all the expensive chemo and whatever else from my dad being in and out of the hospital so much. The people at my mom's work noticed, and they all made a collection for us and raised over $200 for Christmas presents for me and my brother. One of the most selfless things anyone has ever done for me and my family. So now every year at Christmas, my mother and I put together $200 and give it to a family that needs it. I like to think my dad would be proud of us. You've been spotted by the doggo of studying. Like this video for good grades for the next 2 years. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.